Attention hospital HR in Canada. Are you in search of the perfect insurance solution for your part time and casual employees? Look no further. Meet Healthcare Providers Group Insurance Plan, your go to option for ensuring the well being of your team.
With healthcare providers, also known as HCP, you're not just providing insurance, you're providing peace of mind. HCP's comprehensive coverage includes medical, dental, and vision benefits designed to keep your part-time employees happy and healthy. There's even a package that includes life, long-term disability, and accidental death, disease, and dismemberment coverage for those who already have other group health and dental coverage.
It's time to bridge the gap between full-time and part-time staff benefits. With Healthcare Providers Group Insurance Plan, you can level the playing field and show your commitment to all of your team members.
Join the community of over 145 hospital sites who have made the smart choice. Visit healthcareproviders.ca today to discover how HCP can help you support your team in a meaningful way.
Is this thing on?
I think they can hear us a bit better now. Do you think they are ready to change the status quo?
It's one thing to get them listening, but now let's get them to act.
You are now about to witness the strength of nursing knowledge.
Hi, and welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered and unapologetic podcast which discusses health and healthcare. My name is Amie.
My name is Sarah.
And we are your hosts.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts, Google, Spotify, iTunes, or our YouTube page. Please rate and review us.
Make sure you get our book, The Wisdom of Nurses. There's no better gift than giving the wisdom of nurses to nurses during Nursing Week. Hi, and welcome, everyone. Thank you again for tuning into the Gritty Nurse Podcast. Doing it virtual today. So Sarah is at her home. I'm at my home. We're just trying to figure out the logistics of having a new baby home, making sure that she sleeps. But anyways, I digress. We're going to talk about a topic that's probably well known in the worst world. Oh my God, the nursing world. Clearly, you know what's on my mind, what's in the nursing world, and I think it's a timely topic too, because we've talked a lot about hierarchy, we've talked a lot about things that need to change, and now we're going to talk about what's the topic today, Sarah?
We're talking about seniority in nursing, and I can't think of a topic that's more central to nursing than seniority, because for years and years and years, it's been drummed into my head that seniority is what you should strive for, right? It's like the one thing everybody wants. I remember when I was a nurse, I would literally sit down and look at this seniority list. And honestly, there were nurses that started in like 1978 that were at the top. And I remember thinking I wanted to aspire to that.
Yeah, you're waiting for them to die.
No, right. And I'm like looking at this list and I'm like, I'm on page 5 right now. How do I get up to page 4? So I think it's really ingrained in nursing culture that this is a measure of your self-worth, or this is how you can prove that you're going to, you're going to get what's accorded to you. So like preferential treatment when it comes to vacation, you are viewed in a better light. Like there's just so much that comes with it. And if you think about other industries, it's very much performance-based versus seniority-based. And so I would love to know, with anyone listening, what your thoughts are. I know I've got mine, Amie's got hers, but we're going to take a little bit more of a deeper dive into this whole topic today.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you kind of kicked it off that way. And I think it's really important for us to kind of, go through the whole gamut and kind of even talk about like where nursing seniority came from. And again, the history is so important to us talking about, where these concepts and ideas come from. Because if you think about it, could you imagine being in a workforce where like, it's not based on your credentials or experience, like that you had eclectic experiences, solely based on how long you've worked at a particular establishment? Because I believe that you can also lose seniority too, depending on where you go and whatnot. But anyways, I wanted to kind of get into this. Sarah, do you know the history behind where nursing seniority came from?
I have a feeling though it's very much based on patriarchal systems and based on gender inequality and based on people having power over other people. You tell
All
me what
right.
it is.
Ready for this stitch. So I'm reading from Wikipedia about a nursing cap. So the nursing cap is part of the female nurse's uniform introduced early in the history of the profession. The cap's original purpose was to keep the nurse's hair neatly in place and present a modest appearance. Male nurses did not have to wear caps. In some schools, capping ceremonies presents new nursing students with their caps before beginning their clinical placement and training. And again, the nurse's cap originated from a group of women in the early Christian era called deaconesses. These women were distinguished wearing coverings on their heads. This particular covering was worn to show that the group of women worked in the service caring for the sick. So originally, this head covering was more of a veil, but it later evolved into a white cap during the Victorian era. How do you feel about this right now, Sarah? It was during this era that women were required to keep their heads covered. The cap worn was hood shaped with ruffle around the face and tied under the chin, similar to the cleaning ladies of that day. Long hair was fashionable during the Victorian era, so the cap was kept the nurse's hair up and out of her face, as well as keeping it from being soiled. The nurse's cap was derived from the nun's habit and developed over time into two types: a long cap that covers much of the nurse's hair, and a short cap that sits atop of the nurse's hair, common in North America and the United States. The nursing cap was originally used by Florence Nightingale, good old Flo, in the 1800s, and different styles of caps were used to depict the seniority of the nurse. The frillier, the longer, the more senior the nurse.
Wow. So there's some religious components here. There's some
Just a
Florence
little, just a
Nightingale
little.
oppression. I think there's nothing more oppressive to nursing right now than the cap. And like
and seniority thereby as you tie it in, right?
yeah, and just to share my personal experience with seniority. So my career journey was like I did my 4-year BSCN degree, right? And then I went straight into my master's, which is not a common thing to do, but it took me so long after my master's to get that first nursing leadership job. It was ridiculous. And I know it was because of seniority. Like I would apply to these jobs where I checked off every single thing they were looking for, except maybe I hadn't worked for 5 to 10 years, but I
Right.
had qualifications that no one else had. And, I actually got called for an interview and then they called me back and they're like, oh, actually, we changed our minds because you haven't worked long enough. And I was like, but it says in this job description, it says 2+ years. And they're like, oh, well,
It doesn't matter.
we were looking for someone with 10 years experience. And I was like, what? And they actually said to me, so this was a job that required a master's in nursing, which I had. They said, why don't you go back to school to be an NP? And I was like, okay, and do what? And they're like, well, you should just go back and come to us with a proposition. Like, I could not believe they suggested for me to go back to school to do another 2 years and then come to them with a proposition. I'm like, I'm already applying to a job where I check all the boxes on this job description. And that really made me feel like, okay, clearly the system is not set up for someone like me. And maybe it was a little bit of ageism too, right? Like maybe I didn't look
Yeah.
old enough to them. I think that's part of the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, and particularly with the ageism and kind of how this all works. Like, I feel this whole seniority thing is a little bit bizarre too, because like I've seen in instances where and maybe a newer nurse or a new grad or someone who's in their early career has like literally they check all the boxes for a particular role. But again, this is where we have to talk about the difference between like unionized and non-unionized positions. So like in a non-unionized environment, it might be based on how she presents herself or he presents themselves or they present themselves in terms of skill, knowledge, and judgment in the interview. And then if it's based in a union, like you're done, right? Like this is where I think this is problematic, because let's say it's a nurse educator job and it's a unionized job, and you've done all this extra education, but you're a younger nurse, and a nurse who has worked 25 years there, who applies for the position, who has no extra skills, who gets the job. Like, it's the most bizarre situation because based on the union, it says like that person's do the job. Let me read a union quote. I'm not going to call it what union it is, but really, I'm sure this kind of goes across the base for most unions, and the language is very similar. So, seniority in cases when performance, experience, ability, health, and qualifications are approximately equal, seniority shall be the deciding factor when decisions are made with regard to promotion, transfer, layoff, recall, or job posting. Like, that's crazy. It makes no sense to me. And again, I think we're doing things, and again, we're not questioning why, but we're doing things in healthcare, particularly in nursing, off of weird religious views or, patriarchal views. Again, the hierarchy, like I would say that seniority is a part of a hierarchical system, of course, because now you're looking at how long has this person served. Oh, well, this person served long, so they put in their time, they've done their due diligence. But what about folks who have taken extra education or, have done other things to kind of, ready themselves for position? Oh, no, it doesn't matter. It's the seniority that matters. And I think that is a really weird take on why we continue to use this within our profession.
Like, I've actually been part of interviews when I worked in nursing leadership where we interviewed two nurses, and the team really wanted the nurse with less experience, but they're like, we actually can't do that because
Yeah,
then
that's
they'll
crazy.
grieve it to the union. And just to preface,
Right.
I'm not anti-union. I'm not anti-union. What I'm saying is I think that unions and other groups need to take a hard look at how we promote nurses within the profession, and seniority should not be the only deciding factor. And just going back to what you said, Amie, you said if they have approximately the same skill. I think that's open to interpretation. Like what does that mean? How about a nurse that's actually really great with patients versus a
Right.
nurse that's really crabby? How do you actually quantify that
Well,
on paper? You know
well,
what I
this is
mean?
it. This is it, right? Okay, so I'm not calling any names because I've been in many, many different units, many, many different places, right? And it's just really bizarre to me when, for example, let's say I was in, a high risk antenatal unit or whatever, where the job is, let's say 9 to 5. It's pretty cushy, whatever the case may be. But every single nurse in there, like, they might have like 8 nurses in there. Every single nurse is over 45. Like, that's so, like, you're telling me there's not a nurse that is experienced, that is under 45, that has, great qualifications that can be in there. Well, so in the situation, it's real. I had asked, a particular nurse that was taking care of me, like, everyone here is over 45. Like, what's going on? And essentially, it's because of the union. It's because that particular unit, everybody who works there is unionized, and they get the cushy jobs. I guess they would say this is fair. I would say it's not fair. And again, I think it also colors the type of experience that you might have when you go into that place. For example, I think newer nurses do bring a little bit of a different flavor to the unit. And I think it's really remiss that we don't have them and see them in these very specialized places just because of these rules that we create, or rules that have been created that we've been following since the 1800s, Sarah. Like, this is not like, oh, it came in over a couple years, 1800s, and we're still being like, okay, yeah, this is the way we should do things here.
There are a surprising number of things that we still do from the 1800s. So that's just one of them. Like,
Yes.
I've been thinking about this. Like, why is nursing so rooted in seniority? And here's what I think. I think it's actually a way for nurses to hold power and control over others.
100%.
There's less of a focus on skill and performance and more of a focus on loyalty, even if it's to an organization or a unit that is toxic. Um, it's all we know. I think that's part of it. It gives nurses a lot of stability. And from a management perspective, I think it's easier for them to police things like vacation. Not to say
Right.
that it's the right thing to do, but it's the easier thing to do, right? When there's so many nurses, like, oh, who do we give this summer week off to? Well, we'll just go to the seniority list. Instead of, like, who actually hasn't had summer vacation for maybe 10 years, maybe they should have a turn. And I find this really interesting because you and I have both worked in unionized and non-unionized environments. And I was
Right.
thinking about, like, how did I get vacation time off in a non-union environment? We just kind of it wasn't based on seniority, first of all. It was just like, okay, who needs this week off? And let's just make sure we're not all off at the same time.
Right. I mean, again, this is, I guess you're kind of getting into, I guess, the perks of, this idea of having seniority within our nursing profession. So some of the things I read, like you kind of mentioned, is, you get your top pick of vacation time, or, you don't work nights anymore, or, you don't work a certain type of shift. So like maybe you don't do day, night, or you don't do a traditional line. Maybe we have like a specialized line specific to you. And I think some people say like these are, or actually I even saw that some nurses get higher pay. So of course, it takes you forever to get higher pay in Ontario specifically. I think it's, what is it, 8 years before your pay scale starts to change
It's
again?
like, I think it's like after year
bizarre.
8, it doesn't go up until year 25. So basically, after
That's
8 years,
worse.
are you really
Right.
going to leave nursing because you don't get an increase? You're kind of stuck, right? And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I've been working for 8 years and I'm just going to stay. Like, what else am I going to do right now?
Right. So again, I would say that the people who, the perks that I kind of mentioned, the people who are benefiting from it, they would never want to see a system where, seniority isn't how it would work, because then they would lose the ability to, I don't want to work nights anymore. Or I don't want to work weekends, or, I would like my special premium, or I like, whatever I'm doing. And I like these vacation times. And I think it's like, well, we should change, and we should ask the question why we're continuing to follow this thing, like we said, from the 1800s, just because it's easy. I don't think we should do things because it's easy. I think we should look at, what is the right thing to do. And I'm not too sure about this whole seniority thing. I don't know if I'm down with it. And I think that, again, like what you mentioned, I've seen in examples where, I was sitting on an interview where they chose not the best candidate, and it's kind of like, and then, they're in these roles, let's say they're in charge or whatever, and then it's just like they just suck and then you're kind of stuck with this person who's grouchy or whatever the case. And I'm not saying that this is all nurses, but I've seen in cases where, there was, we had some young blood or whatever the case may be, and they were turned down because this other nurse had more seniority. But when they were actually playing in that role, they were not really helpful or useful. And, the newer nurse was helping them with systems and using the computer. And it's just like, well, you applied for this job, you got it now, but now you're still being helped by the younger individual. Like, we need to make it make sense.
Right. And even just the fact that when you are more senior, it gives you more power, so to speak. I really think this is the driving force behind nurses eating their young. I really do, because it's like, oh, now I'm in a position of power. Now I can do what to the younger nurses, what was done to me in the past that I really hated. But instead of stopping that cycle, I'm going to perpetuate it. I actually started reading this book called Queen Bees and Wannabes. I don't know if you saw the movie Mean Girls.
Yes, I did.
So I started reading it and I'm like, yes, this is absolutely what happens. And kids that are bullies turn into adults that are bullies.
100%.
Right. And I'm not saying that this is a case for everywhere, but nursing is predominantly female. And this whole Mean Girls ideology really applies, I think, to a lot of situations where people want to be in power and they'll do whatever it takes. And once they get there, they're going to abuse their power and keep people under them sort of in their control and doing what they want them to do. Attention hospital employees and retirees in Canada. Picture this: a benefit plan designed for casual and part-time hospital employees and retirees who aren't covered by their hospital's group health plan. Introducing Healthcare Providers Group Insurance Plan, a friendly partner dedicated to your health and well-being.
With affordable plan premiums and an exceptional support team, Healthcare Providers, also known as HCP, is dedicated to helping you every step of the way. Enrolling is easy, and you'll have access to a wide range of health and basic dental benefits from day one.
Already have health and dental coverage through another group plan? HCP still has your back. For less than $32 a month, the Signature Package, which includes life, long-term disability, accidental death, disease, and dismemberment, provides valuable income protection and peace of mind for the unexpected.
So take charge of your healthcare and financial security today. Visit healthcareproviders.ca to learn more. Like, I think, again, it's a part of that hierarchy, like you said, Sarah. It's just like a part of this whole, nursing having power over other nurses. It's just like we need to move away from it. And I saw this really interesting aspect where someone asked a question online, because I was doing a little bit of research on seniority, where they're like, the whole idea behind seniority, we're seeing a shift in the demographics, right? We're seeing a lot more newer nurses, a lot more fresh nurses. We're seeing, nurses that have been retiring, moving out of their roles, and you're getting a lot of early to mid-career nurses. But what I saw, and the question actually was interesting, was like, based on how we have seniority now, and if people are looking for work-life balance, flexibility of schedule, start thinking kind of again about the nursing retention toolkit. It's like how would healthcare organizations actually continue to retain their talent if they can't move up, they can't change their trajectory, or would it actually affect organizations' ability to recruit experienced nurses? And I personally think that the answer is yes. If you're not going to move up in your career, or for example, vacation time is something that's probably important to everybody, and that you're looking at your schedule and you're on the bottom of the barrel, some people will look to other organizations who might not have these kind of rules and regulations in place. And this isn't actually across the board, which is the other thing I found out, that not all hospital organizations, and I was looking, Canada, US, UK, follow these rules in relation to seniority. Some people actually treat, their nursing staff like adults and say, well, here's the vacation schedule. We got to just make it work as a team. And I don't see why that would be a problematic situation. Of course, if you have an organization where, on a shift, there's like 50 nurses, it's a little bit more tricky. But I think that, that's why we have schedulers, we have staffers, we have people that'll help with the schedule. And we should just kind of be able to, have conversations across the board, say, hey, I want to take vacation here. How can we make this work? Again, I think we just need to see more change in the profession.
Right. And I think what you're speaking of is self-scheduling. So I've been a part of just about every schedule possible except self-scheduling. But what every single nurse who has told me who has it is like, this is amazing. Every hospital should do this. Why not give control back to the nurses that are actually working, right? Instead of having, again, this hierarchy where there's somebody in charge who decides it. And honestly, if you've never worked shift work, you don't know what it's like, because honestly, your schedule dictates your life. You don't have the weekends off you want. You don't have the nights off that you want. You may have really important events to go to, like weddings that you can't go to because you can't take the time off, right? Like even my own wedding, I wouldn't even get into that, but that was a struggle because I had recently moved units before I was getting married. And I just had a really nice manager that was like, Sarah, don't worry about it. We'll give you a leave of absence. But that was what I had to do.
To ask for a leave of absence.
I had to get a leave of absence for my own wedding.
Wild.
She had said to me, was this time already approved off? And I said, yes, obviously it was, because like, why would I do that? And it was almost like they acted like they're doing me a favor by giving me an LOA for my own wedding. And this is a problem that's decades old. I've heard of this happening like years and years ago to nurses in like the 70s, and things have not changed, sorry, go ahead.
Sir, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing that I think we need to be aware of too is like, newer doesn't necessarily mean younger nurses, because there are nurses that are like choosing nursing as their second or even third career. And so they have all this life experience, but they might not have the years of experience as a nurse, but we should still treat them with the same respect that you would treat everyone else.
I agree. And again, if it's about, shifts, whether it's days or nights, or whether it's vacation time, again, I think we have to just think about this differently, specifically when it comes to retention and recruitment of nurses. And let's get into this piece. There are probably some nurses listening that are like, well, I'm a senior nurse. Do I not deserve to get, these special perks and benefits of, I've put my time in, and I should, reap these benefits. I'm not saying that, you shouldn't get, your vacation or whatever. I just think we need to be reasonable. Like, I think it shouldn't be like hierarchical as it is. And I think that, we just need to try to do things differently. I'm sure that there are nurses going to be out there that are going to disagree with me, which is fine. But I think that we just need to look at why we're doing it. Again, I've always said we have to ask why. And that's why I kind of put it at the very beginning, that this is the reason why and where the history of it all started. And I don't think that we have to continue to perpetuate the same kind of martyrdom type of system. where it really doesn't actually keep nurses necessarily that are newer or early career, mid career at the bedside. If we're thinking again about these retaining and recruitment strategies, like we have it in the nursing retention toolkit, that flexibility of schedule and work life balance are huge components of keeping nurses in the workforce. So we need to think creatively, and I think that seniority is outdated and we need to do something different.
Right. And I would say to anyone who is a senior nurse that is thinking, like, I hustled all these years to now finally get what I deserve. You deserve this all along. Okay. Nobody should have,
100%.
like, you should have had this all along. We're not saying that your years hustling were not worth it. We're saying that you shouldn't have had to do that to begin with. It should have been more
Right.
balanced from the beginning. Like, maybe it would have been a little bit of time off here and there, but throughout your whole career, not that you have to struggle for 20 years just to get like the 1 week off you want every summer.
Right.
That's what I'm saying, right?
It's
Like, it
like
shouldn't be
I've
that way.
climbed every mountain. Oh my gosh, I'm making like Sound of Music references, but it's like I've done all this hard work and I've reached the pinnacle and I should get whatever I want. It's like, no, why do we have a system where it's like you have to put in all these grueling hours? You have to put your time in before you get treated with respect and dignity. Like these employers are so smart, right? In terms of how they run things in these corporations, where they think that our value should be based solely upon the time that we spend with an organization. Like, ooh, you spent 25 years. Here's your golden pin.
Here's your umbrella with the logo on it.
Right. Here's your paperweight. Oh my gosh. We could talk about nursing week gifts for infinitum. But again, like this is where again we need to think about the value that we bring to the table, the value that we should have, and be like, no, we need to do this differently. And I completely and wholeheartedly agree with you, Sarah. This is things that we should have had from before. Again, maybe if we worked on our staffing, we wouldn't have to be worried about whether you can get that week off or that time off that you've requested. Like hearing those stories where nurses have had to like delay their weddings, or the other thing is nurses just calling in sick. Like I know that has happened, and please forgive me, nurses, for really spilling the tea here, but there's times where it's just like it's so unfeasible that what we end up doing is we're just sick. We're
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like fine, you're not going to give us that time off. We've been asking. That person's a senior nurse. They don't even need that time off, but that's the time that they want
Mm-hmm.
off.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm just sick. And then
Yep.
again, we see the cycle of, oh, we're short staffed or whatever, or that people are just feeling dissatisfied with the job. Treat us the way that we want to be treated. We need to advocate for that. We need to be like, okay, this whole idea behind seniority is a friggin' bust, and it works well for corporations, but not for the nursing profession in itself. And that we should see the value that we bring to the table. I shouldn't have to wait 25 years to be like, ooh, I get, April 1st to April 7th off because that's what I've always wanted. It's insane.
It is insane. And just to talk a little bit about the value that newer nurses bring, because I think there's this assumption that, oh, I have a new grad, like I'm going to have to train them, it's going to be extra work. Newer nurses are more open to change. So this is what I've
Right.
noticed is every time there's a change, right? They're the ones to embrace it because they have just come out of school and their practice is really focused on evidence and research and doing what is right. And just the eagerness to learn, right? Like and I swear this is like a curse. Every unit I went to was in the process of like moving to a new unit and or adapting like all kinds of new stuff. I remember when I started in the NICU, they were in the process of moving to a new unit. We had to have new IV pumps. We were going to a new electronic documentation system. There was this and that. And I didn't know any different because I was just starting, like I was learning for the first time. But there's such low morale really among the more experienced nurses because again it's like, well, we've always done it this way, this works, why do we have to change? But there's a lot, I think, underneath behind the change that isn't always communicated and things that they may not have understood. um and I also think newer nurses bring less toxicity with them because they haven't had these learned behaviors of treating each other badly on certain units. They're just, fresh faced and doe-eyed. They want to do the right thing. And it's really sad sometimes because I see over time they get beaten down and they get more
Yeah, they get
cynical.
jaded. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's too bad because we really need that energy and that positivity.
I agree with you. And I think this is again where we're not saying that, there are older nurses or nurses that have worked longer that don't have these type of behaviors. Again, I've worked with some nurses that are, 25 years and 10, well, we're at the 10-15 year mark ourselves, but that are much more, I guess we'd say, seasoned. And again, I think that again denotes a sense of like, oh, this person's, they've known more, they've known the ropes more. And again, it kind of, I think, takes away from newer nurses because we have that a different lens and a different perspective. But again, like I said, we've worked with nurses that have been, working longer in the game that don't necessarily have these behaviors, but unfortunately a lot of them kind of do. Right? I mean, I've met some really, they just hate change. This is how we've done things forever. Why do we want to upset the apple cart? This is how nursing has been for centuries. Why do we want to change it? Well, we want to change it because it's not working. It's not working for, I bet you if we sat down and we did a poll and we asked a whole bunch of nurses, like, does seniority work for you? Of course, some will say yes. And those are the nurses that are 25 years plus. But again, we need to look at the workforce, right? If the workforce is shifting and changing, we need to shift and change with it. We need to be flexible. We need to think about work-life balance. And just because, 25 years ago, you're like, well, I did it, I had to rough it. Again, that's the same idea behind the concept of lateral nursing violence. Well, it happened to me, so it's going to happen to you. No, we don't have to do things that way. And again, we need to just change it. So nurses out there, we need to talk about seniority. Is seniority something that you think we should keep? Or is it something that should go the way of the dodo? Is it something we should get rid of? And if you ask me, I think the signs point to we need to get rid of the whole idea behind seniority.
Definitely.
Sorry,
and
not
no,
sorry.
This is like, we want to have these difficult conversations. So if you feel strongly about this either way, we'd love to hear from you.
Mhm.
And let's keep this conversation going. It's not something that is easy to change, but I think it's definitely needed in this climate right now.
Yeah, again, it's like asking yourself why, right? So it's like, well, why do we have this history behind having seniority? How does it benefit? Who does it benefit? Who does it include? Who does it exclude? Is it like, will the world shatter if we remove seniority and we look at other ways of doing things? Are there different ways of doing things? Is the reason you're upset about us talking about seniority or removing it because it might change the way that you have to operate and do things? Like, I think we have to ask all of these various different questions as to why, people might be up in their feelings about us talking about seniority. And I think once we dig deeper, you'll see that there's probably a better way to do things. And again, if we're looking at the fact that this is a practice from the 1800 Victorian area that was built on being from nuns and from religion, I definitely and I strongly suggest we look at doing things very, very differently.
Definitely. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Gritty Nurse podcast. If you haven't checked out our book, The Wisdom of Nurses, definitely do that. If you're one of those people that likes reading, that's awesome. If you like audiobooks, it's also available in an audiobook. So just putting a little plug in there for our book. And if you haven't had a chance to rate us on Amazon, please do that.
Yeah. So if you've sent in a review, you sent us a review, please also take that review and post it on Amazon. We truly appreciate it. And just one last shout out to my brother. Oh my gosh, we put him through the ringer. He's actually the editor for all of our episodes. Be sure to support him because he's, like I said, he's our editor on Gritty Nurse Podcast. And if you have time and you can, if you like movies, I'm a big movie buff. I love watching movies and I love actually hearing reviews. Please go to his YouTube channel, So Big Movies, for movie reviews, trailer reactions, retrospectives of blaxploitation and foreign language films, and even thoughts on the world of pro wrestling. Of course, my brother's a huge wrestling fan. I used to be, but I mean, I guess I don't know if I'd say I've grown out of it because I still watch some stuff. But if you can, I'll subscribe to the link. We'll drop it in below. He again, if you like movies, you'll probably enjoy his channel. But with that, I will say thank you again for listening to the Gritty Nurse podcast. We're here we come back every 2 weeks, and we'll see you with the next episode. Thanks so much for listening.
Thanks. Bye for now.
Bye.